The Gulf South Conference is the premier football conference of Division II. It's the home of 11 football national championships and 5 Harlan Hill Trophy winners. Now, bringing you in-depth coverage and pinpoint analysis every week with the GSC Football Weekly Podcast, here are your hosts, Matt Zaleski and Mike Ezekiel.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Gulf South Conference Weekly Football Podcast. We are coming to you from the Fox Sports Show studio here in Florence, Alabama. I am Matt Zaleski. Alongside me, as always, Mike Ezekiel and our producer, Will Corey, hanging out behind the camera. Mike, good afternoon, buddy. How are you?
Good, Matt. Good morning, good afternoon, however you want to say it. But, hey, glad to be here today talking about some Division II football.
Well, you know, I guess we do this in the afternoon so much. I'm so used to saying good afternoon.
Right.
But it is still morning right now when we're shooting this podcast. But I guess
I'm not awake.
For the listener, you know, whenever it could be morning or afternoon.
Or night or anytime, yeah.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
You're right.
Well, Mike, as much as we love the Gulf South Conference, as good as the conference has been, the playoffs did not treat the Gulf South Conference well in the first round. 3 teams made the playoffs. UNA did get a bye, so they are automatically into the second round. But the other 2 teams that were in the playoffs, Valdosta State and Florida Tech, both of those teams have been eliminated after the first round. I think West Alabama and West Georgia, if they were playing their type of football, could have been very dangerous teams if they would have gotten in. I know West Alabama had to feel pretty bad. We talked about that last week. Being a 7 seed, we got kicked back to the 8 seed because of Tuskegee's earned access. But, you know, I think with the quarterback being out for Florida Tech really hurt them against North Greenville. And for Valdosta State, maybe they overachieved a little bit this year. I mean, they had moments where they looked good. They had moments where they didn't. Certainly threw a lot of picks in this past week's game. They also got a lot of picks, so maybe that evened itself out. But outgained by North Carolina Pembroke, and both of their seasons come to an end. And I can only guess with Florida Tech, if Mark Cato was healthy, or he is healthy, if he was eligible, if he was not suspended, maybe that game would have been different. I don't know. I didn't see it, but that would be my thought process there. But the way it's worked itself out, both teams eliminated. UNA, the Gulf South Conference lone hope to try to chase a national championship.
Yeah, an unfortunate week for the Gulf South Conference last week. You talked about Florida Tech. You talked about Valdosta a little bit. You know, let's just start with Valdosta and just kind of what happened with them. They did throw 4 interceptions, but did get 5 takeaways. So the turnover battle, they actually did win, but only got 32 yards on the ground. So that was kind of a one-dimensional game for Valdosta State. And anytime they tried to throw the ball, they were either getting yards or throwing picks. And usually when you do that, it's not going to be a good game for you if you can't get anything going on the ground. So Pembroke really took advantage of the mistakes and got the win. So kind of an unfortunate loss for Valdosta at home. Florida Tech, kind of the same thing, losing at home to North Greenville. Thought that they could win that game. First time ever being in the playoffs, and to fall 27-13 without Mark Cato at quarterback was really tough for them. And you know they gotta hate to be out as well. And you know, Matt, in our picks, at least in mine, the only ones I got wrong were in Super Region 2. I went 0-3 in Super Region 2, went 9-0 outside. So maybe I'm not credible here. I don't know, or maybe we were just all wrong. I think everybody pretty much, not everybody, but most people would probably had the same picks we did. Expecting the GSC to win, but like we said, round 1 was just kind of a bad break for the Gulf South.
Well, you know, a couple things here, and maybe why I would have switched my pick some. I mean, I missed the Valdosta game, but you know, I still took Florida Tech over North Greenville. But when you just don't know who the backup quarterback is, and you don't know how he's going to play, and you don't know anything about him, I knew Florida Tech was an iffy pick just based on I don't know how good they were behind Cato. And Cato's been a guy that's put up big numbers for that team for many years now. And Newberry didn't know until after the game that their quarterback was suspended, and they still only lost by 2. So I feel like if their quarterback would have played, they probably would have won. That's not to take away from Tuskegee, but if you lose by 2 without your quarterback, you feel like you'll probably win with your quarterback.
And they had a wide receiver actually playing the second half. Their backup quarterback actually got hurt in the second quarter, so they were rolling with a wide receiver at quarterback, and it was kind of an interesting dynamic for them. But again, Tuskegee did get the win. And, you know, I got to watch a lot of the Valdosta game and some of the Florida Tech game, and the takeaway I had from Florida Tech, I expected them to actually do better and win that game because, you know, behind Cato, they had, I believe, at least 10 guys that were on the all-conference team in the preseason, and I think they did more of the same in the in the postseason. So, they had a lot of weapons. Their tight end's probably the best tight end in the nation, Johnston. Offensive line, they had 3 guys on the all-conference team, so they have a strong offensive line. Their running backs are good. Trevor Sand and Antoine Haynes, we know how good they are. And then the defense has been good. Stapleton was good on defense. He's been the staple, so to speak, of their defense for years. And they had a really good defense and did a good job of forcing turnovers, but just really didn't come to play in that game, it didn't seem. And without Cato, I guess it kind of took some wind out of them. But I actually did expect them to win that game. It wasn't really iffy for me. I just thought they were the better team, seeing what they've done all year. But then again, you get in the playoffs and anything can happen. And North Greenville really proved to deserve to win that game.
Yeah, they really did. And yeah, it looked like they did a good job of kind of honing in on Sand and Haynes. They did combine for 144 yards on 34 carries, but, and not dominant by any stretch, about a little over 4 yards a pop between the two of them. But the two quarterbacks, Ziano, if I'm saying
Ziarno, yeah, he's the local product. You see, I had it backward last week. Ryan Singer's actually the Presbyterian transfer.
Okay.
I thought that was Ziarno, but Ziarno is actually a local product.
Okay, and between Singer and Ziarno, they completed 12 of 22 passes for 180 yards, just under that 174 yards, that's not bad in and of itself. But you throw in the no touchdowns and the 3 picks, and they didn't help themselves right there much. So, North Greenville moves on, and they're not a GSC team yet. They will be in 2 years. So take a little credit for that in the GSC. No, I'm just kidding.
There you go.
Good job by North Greenville there. And flipping over, to Valdosta and UNC Pembroke. And, both teams turned the ball over. Pembroke threw 5 picks. Patrick O'Brien had 1 touchdown and 5 picks. So Valdosta really got the turnovers, but didn't take enough advantage of those turnovers, where Adam Robles for Valdosta threw 4 picks. So, 9 interceptions in one game. Mike, that's a lot of damn interceptions. Probably 8 too many, Oh, yeah. You ask the coaches, 9 too many. But you look here in Valdosta's inability to run the football, 18 total carries for 32 yards. And, that's less than 2 yards a pop. They did throw for some yards, but a low completion percentage, 21 and 55. You're talking about, 36, 37%. I'm trying to do some math off the top of my head. And then the 3 touchdowns to 4 picks. Really a struggle there. But I did talk to Coach Wallace, Bobby Wallace of the UNA Lions on my morning show, and now they get prepared for UNC Pembroke. And he talked about a great defensive line that they have, Mike. And kind of learning that, it tells me why maybe Valdosta struggled as much as they did. That D-line's really good for UNC Pembroke, one of the strengths of their team. And that probably was the difference in why Valdosta couldn't move the ball as well as they've been moving it as of late in the conference.
It's exactly what it was. Watching that game, their pass rush, they love to blitz, and that's exactly what they did in this game. They got 3 sacks, 4 interceptions, and all 4 of the interceptions, to me, I saw 2 of them at the end, and both of those seemed like forced throws from Robles off his back foot or just, under pressure making some throws. So, and that was tough. So UNC Pembroke may be one of the better pass rushes that you see all year, especially UNA next week. That's going to be one thing they key in on is that pass rush. They're so good, they're quick, and they're big, and they're strong. So they're going to be trouble for any defensive line, and that was a big part of why Pembroke got the win over Valdosta. The pass rush was just too good and too hard to stop.
Kenny Moore for Valdosta led the team in tackles with 10. He had 2 tackles for a loss, and he had 2 interceptions with 32 return yards. So an outstanding performance by Kenny Moore on the Valdosta defense. Brandon Rowe also had 6 tackles, 3 of which were solo, and he had 2 interceptions as well for 36 yards and a pass breakup. So Valdosta's defense did a lot to keep them in the game, but offensively, which I thought was really more of their calling card this year, just could not come up with the right stuff when they needed it. But that's a credit to UNC Pembroke. This is a team that's less than 10 years old, Mike, but they continue to get better and better and better, going in the right direction. And they have faced UNA the last 3 years, came up short all 3 times, fairly short in all 3 of them at that. But they will come in fired up. Coach, once again, I did talk to UNA head football coach Bobby Wallace, and he said, talking about a team with a pile of confidence and some guys with a lot of experience. This team was built really the foundational way. And while I do believe when you can get your hands on a good JUCO product or a good Division I transfer, then obviously you do it anytime you can. But at the same time, I've seen teams that are built through just transfers of Division I and JUCO transfers, and you don't really have those foundational guys always necessary to win. And one thing about UNC Pembroke, a lot of their players are those 4 and 5 year foundational players. And when you get that, Mike, what I believe is you get a lot of chemistry and synergy on a football team, because a lot of times, you get a kid that played in a high level of Division I football or even a mid-level Division I football. I mean, Division II, with the type of crowd you play in front of, it really drops off drastically from what you're used to playing in. And I think a lot of times these guys come up with a mentality, I'm going to come dominate Division II, and Division II is a lot better. And then if you get one too many of those guys on the team, they tend to play for themselves more so than playing for a team. And I'm not singling any one particular team out on this notion. I'm talking about in generality. So I think that's really key to get those foundational guys. Do want to be clear. If you get a good Division I transfer, a good JUCO transfer, take advantage of that. There's a reason that guy went to a Division I school to begin with, but you don't want to build your whole roster based on that. And I think Pembroke's done a really good job of building this program through those foundational guys. Current coach Pete Shinnick of West Florida built this UNC Pembroke team. He's left it, but they're still in great shape, even with him gone.
Yeah, and their defensive coordinator is actually who's there now, who worked under Shinnick. He took over after Shinnick left, and like you said, Matt, they really did build a really good foundation. I think when you talked to Coach Wallace this morning, I actually got to hear some of what he said. 22 starters have been upperclassmen on the roster for at least 2 years, I believe, and then I think he said 14 of those guys were redshirted. So, that says a lot about their chemistry, and I absolutely agree with that. I look at UNA's 3 national championship teams from the 90s. Seems like those were all high school guys that kind of came in together and just had some time to build that camaraderie with each other. And Division I transfers, JUCO transfers, they're not bad. It's good to have those. But like you said, you made a great point. You don't want to build your whole roster around those. And those teams seem to crumble, even though they are the favorites many times, they seem to crumble. So UNC Pembroke, I think, is a good example of a team that's just built year after year. And I think they've been a program 8 years now. So for them to get their first ever playoff win against Valdosta State was big for them. They were ready to play. And I expect them to be ready to play this week. I think they're going to look to shock UNA a little bit, even though UNA is a 95% favorite in the Massey poll.
What this Massey ratings, Massey rankings, Massey poll, explain this a little bit to our listeners, and while you're doing it for them, you'll be doing it for me too.
Well, you see, I don't know too much about it, but I know it's for Division II. It's basically a rating system, kind of like any computer poll would be, and just like any computer poll would rank strength of schedule and things like that, and just kind of gives a prediction of how the games are going to come out. And UNA, I think this week is the biggest favorite in their playoff game, 95-5. But it was pretty wrong last week. I think it went 6 of 6. It got all Super Region 2 wrong.
Where can you find this poll at?
You have to do a lot of searching. I think if you Google Division II Massey rating, you could probably find it. I usually just find it on d2football.com. They usually do a good job of presenting those. You can find them on the message boards. I like to read those from time to time, and they put them on there as well. But
Mike, I got to tell you, if all you got to do is go to d2football.com, it ain't that hard to find.
No,
it ain't that much searching.
Those guys do a really good job of putting everything out there for you.
So what's that? We got the producer in the back. Will, what you got for us?
Go to masseyratings.com.
Okay. Will needs to be on camera. He needs to be on camera.
No,
he doesn't want to be on camera.
He likes behind-the-scenes work. He likes being back there. Will's going to be a hand model before it's all said and done. He just uses the hands in front.
The thumbs up. That's his go-to.
Well, Mike, the Massey says 95% to 5%. I think, I don't know how. I like to study how those ratings are used. Some of these polls, I love the metrics. I think they're a lot of fun. I don't know. I don't know if I think they're overrated. You track teams over a certain amount of times, and you say, well, there's something to them. But I also think that you just need to stay with let your own brain work a little bit as well. But I like where UNA's at. I think I really believe that this region has opened up beautifully for UNA. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a UNA alum and I cover the UNA Lions. I really think that the Super Region 2 was not that strong to begin with. And I think with Newberry out because of their quarterback that was suspended, probably why they lost. Once again, I don't want to take away from Tuskegee, but when you lose by 2 and your quarterback doesn't play, you would think he's probably worth 3 points. That would have been the difference in the game. Florida Tech's quarterback was out, and they lost to North Greenville, and we watched UNA really, really handle North Greenville with relative ease this year. it just seems like this thing is opening up well for them. I think that they'll beat Pembroke this weekend, and I think they would be a heavy favorite at home again over Tuskegee or North Greenville. You don't want to jump the gun, and this Pembroke team is confident. While their schedule wasn't as tough as UNA, only one loss, a tight loss to UNA, a tight loss to Tuskegee. So teams that win have confidence. They feel like we're going to win because that's the only feeling they know. But the way UNA's played defense this year, even though they're going to be without standout cornerback Levi Fell, who's been a 4-year starter, I hate it for the Lions team, but I even hate it more personally for Levi because I know him and I really like him. So I hate that for him. But they have a lot of depth on that side of the football. UNA's defense has been incredible all year, really have stifled some good offenses this year. So I think UNA defensively can create similar turnovers that Valdosta State did, but the difference is UNA will be able to capitalize on those turnovers. I'm not sure this game stays close very long. UNA's dominated them 3 years in a row. I think they dominate them 4 years in a row. I got another big win for the Lions, 41-7.
And, I'm going to pick this game, and I'm going to agree with you. I think UNA will win. And I think the main reason, like you said, is defense. I think their defense will really tighten up here. And one key point to look at is Matt Davis is going to be a big difference maker for UNC Pembroke. That is their kicker. He is the only kicker that is in the running for the Harlan Hill right now, and for good reason. He did have a bad game against Valdosta. I think he missed 2 field goals, but obviously made the important one to give them the win. But he had 7 kicks of 50 yards or more, and that's just extremely impressive. So now for UNA, they have to really tighten up and really control field position and try to keep them behind the 50. I really think they'll do a good job of that, but another thing to look at with UNA's defense, they're only giving up 14 points a game. They're the best defense in Super Region 2, probably one of the best defenses in the whole playoffs. I think they're probably third in that category, first in the conference. So defensively, they've been impressive all year. They can put up points when they need to. I expect them to do that in this game, and if I had to throw out a score, probably somewhere 34-20, something like that.
You think it's going to be a lot closer than I do, Mike. I think this UNA team's hungry. They've been in the playoffs a lot over the last few years. This is their 4th year in a row being Gulf South Conference champions, and this is their first year being outright champions. The other 3 they shared, and that's not to take away from it, but 3 of those years, only one of them would they have been the champion from a heads-up matchup. The other 2, they would have lost based on head-to-head. And not to take away from UNA, but I'm a bigger advocate is if you're not playing a conference championship, and they don't do that in Division II, that if 2 teams played heads up and they're tied at the end of the year, I think whoever won that game should be the conference champion. So have one champion if you can have one champion.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. That's not to take away from UNA because the fact that they did share it is still impressive that they were tied atop the standings 3 years in a row. But this year they were the clear-cut winners. They didn't lose any conference games. Their only one loss was at Jacksonville State, who is currently ranked number 2 in the country in the FCS level of Division I. So I think this team's really hungry. I think they got the right mix of guys, and I also think they realized that maybe the window's closing. I thought this was the year they stepped back. I'm not trying to take away from UNA, but I think next year could be a year they step back. I mean, you're going to see a lot of new faces on that football team, and a lot of new faces replacing very key players. And I think they look at this region, and I'm not trying to pick on it, but I think they've got a pretty clear path to the semifinals, and I don't think they want to miss out on that opportunity. Once you get there, we don't know who's going to be waiting. It could be Grand Valley. Northwest Missouri's won 2 of the last 3 championships. They return a lot of players from last year's dominant championship team. I mean, there's going to be some real tests in there. But I really think if UNA plays their brand of football, I don't think there's anybody in this region that can even give them a lot of competition.
And, I have to agree on paper. When you get in the playoffs, everybody's going to be tough. And losing to Tuskegee last year for UNA could be a blessing in disguise. I said that on your morning show, Matt in the Morning. And, I still believe that after losing that game, I think they realized – we could lose any given day, and that's going to happen. And Coach Wallace has had that motto since Media Day back in August, talked about how, you have to look at each opponent that week and not ever look ahead. They've certainly done that all year, and I think they're going to continue to do that. They're really focused on Pembroke this week. I can really tell that in the press conference yesterday on Tuesday. We are shooting this on Wednesday, so, hearing a lot of that, I can tell they're really focused in on this game. But the stars have aligned. I think if they win this game, they'll play the winner of a 6 and 7 seed. While it still could be tough, they did handle North Greenville pretty easily. Tuskegee That's another team they'd probably like to see get revenge on again. So we'll just see how it works out. But like you said, it may not be too challenging until you get to the semifinals.
Yeah, you're right. That's how I feel. But like you said, Mike, great point by you. We were discussing a high school team locally in our area who went 10-0 in the regular season a year ago and dominated everybody en route to that 10-0 record and number 2 in the state. And then they got beat in the second round of the playoffs. And then that same team that went 5-5 this year, they get in the playoffs and they get all the way to the third round. And now that team
one touchdown away from the fourth.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. Lost by 6. So and that's a local high school team here, Muscle Shoals High School. But it goes back to the larger point we're making, which is, once you get in the playoffs, essentially everybody's 0-0 because you got to win from there. And if you're a 1 seed if you're a 1, you're automatically in the second round. But if you're a 2 through a 7, it doesn't matter. I mean, the 2 looks better, but all that gives you is a home game. Doesn't give you a guaranteed win. Mike, let's move on and look at the rest of Super Region 2, where we kind of talked about it a little bit. And I'll let you kind of run through some of your picks throughout the bracket. I'm staying with my number 1 seeds. All my teams are still alive because, well, they didn't have to play last week. They got the automatic advancement to the second round. But I think you're a little more qualified to talk about some of these other teams than I am. So I'll let you kind of break down who you like to continue to move on.
Well, let's just go ahead and finish out Super Region 2. I already made the pick for UNA. I'm actually going to go with Tuskegee in an upset. I guess you could call it an upset, but I like Tuskegee over North Greenville. I think it'll be a very close game. Something that impressed me with Tuskegee last week is just the lack of turnovers that they had. They didn't have any, so I expect them to continue that trend. I don't think North Greenville will really have any takeaways, and if that happens, I really like Tuskegee to win. Now, if there are turnovers, I think turnovers will really be the biggest difference regardless. Whoever has the most turnovers will probably lose, in my opinion, but I do like Tuskegee. And I'll defer back to you on that pick, and then I'll go back to
Yeah, I'll give that one. I like North Greenville in this game. I like them at home. And, Mike, last week we were 0 for the barbecue, pal, for the games that count on our podcast. I know you picked every game right in every other region. But
Except for 2.
but the Region 2 is the only ones that really counted on our records here. So
yeah,
we were both 0 for the barbecue, man, and so we're still knotted up. So this is a bit we both got UNA. So this is the game that could really hit, really swing this thing. I mean, when North Greenville wins, you'll owe me a steak dinner. So once we get to the semifinals here, we'll pick the rest of them. But I mean, if I'm picking a lot of these games the rest of the way, I might as well flip a coin because there's an old saying somebody told me one time. If you can't name one player on either team, you may not have any business picking the game.
There you go.
It was actually more a saying that an old gambler had. If you can't name one player on either team, don't bet the game. Well, I'm going to use that as far as picking games. If you can't name one player on either team, don't pick the game. And I'm not sure I can name hardly any players on these teams. So I know you kind of follow the Division II landscape as a whole bigger than I do, Mike. So I'll let you kind of have fun with the bracket the way it's set up from here out.
Well, sounds good. I'll go with Super Region 1 first. You have it pulled up there. IUP, I did expect them to advance last week. They'll take on California. These are 2 Pennsylvania teams with other state names as their team name, which is kind of weird. Indiana, Pennsylvania versus California, Pennsylvania. How do you go with that? So IUP goes by IUP, but California, probably for a good reason, doesn't go by CUP because that spells cup. Like, who wants to be called Cup University? So California, PA, Indiana, PA. Initially, Matt, I like the upset. I had Indiana, but they're without their starting quarterback, Lenny Williams, who is a Harlan Hill candidate. So I might lean towards California now, given that circumstance. They played in the regular season. California won 31-28. Every other game they've played hasn't been close. So I'm going to go with California in a close game. They do have a backup quarterback that's pretty good, too. He's played a few games, but, I was leaning Indiana until that happened. So I think that one player could make the difference. We saw that in Florida Tech. We saw that in Newberry in Super Region 2 without their starting quarterbacks just kind of crumble. So that's kind of what I'm going with here. So California there. Shepherd and LIU Post. I like Shepherd. I think Shepherd's probably the most experienced playoff team in Super Region 1. I like them to get the win there and move on. Behind their quarterback, Jeff Ziombo, he's been really good for many years. He's another Harlan Hill candidate that's just had great numbers. Moving on to Super Region 3, Emporia State taking on Northwest Missouri State. Once again, I think this Northwest Missouri team's probably the best we've seen in a long time, even though they've been so dominant. They pretty much returned everybody A lot of people thought this year would be their year, and last year would be kind of a step back. Last year was a national championship year, so what can they do this year? I expect them to win and move on. Emporia is a good team, though, and could give them a run, and they've done that for the last few years, but I like Northwest. The other game's going to be very interesting. I'm going to have my eye on that one. Harding taking on Sioux Falls. I like Harding in this game. Harding's rush defense and rush offense is the best in the nation, averaging about 380-something yards per game rushing and only giving up 85. So they've been impressive. I like them to beat Sioux Falls, but Sioux Falls is going to bring a good fight. Could be a good defensive game. I expect it to be somewhere in the ballpark of maybe 24-21, something like that, but I'll take Harding. Super Region 4. Another interesting super region, and Matt, I know you picked Ferris State to make it to the semifinals, and so did I. I expect them to beat Colorado Mines. I expect there to be probably about 200 points in that game. Not
yeah,
really,
I was fixing to say, man, let's see what the over and under is in this bad boy, because Ferris State beat Midwestern State 65-34, and Colorado Mines beat Southwest Baptist 63-35. So 65 and 63 points respectively equals about 128. So
Yeah.
it should be a lot of offense. If you like firepower, this is the game you want to watch.
And in all honesty, I think the over-under is 110. I think that's what I read, and that might have been the Massey. So
Okay, yeah,
so, yeah.
I don't think they put out Vegas lines on these Division II games.
No, but they did have an over-under of 110, I believe. So that could be a high-scoring game. I'll
tell you what, if I was betting a game that had an over and under of 110, they'd have to just prove it to me. There's no way I could bet over 110.
I couldn't
mean,
either.
it wouldn't surprise me if it went over, but I mean, you drive down there to the 10
teams
and
get 50
fumble or
points.
55
Yeah.
a piece. I mean, 56-53 was the final. And you lost on the over. I mean, that's crazy.
It is.
So, I mean, you would. I mean, you can move the ball. You could have 1,300 yards of offense and not get that many points. You get down to the 10 and stall out. I mean, you just never know. That's mind blowing. I've never even heard of an over and under that high. But I mean, I know that there's systems that kind of come up with these numbers. But but it should be a fun game. I really like, and I can't remember his name. He was the coach. He's the University of Montana coach now, and he just finished his second year. And he was the coach of Colorado Mines before he got that job, and really instilled that Hal Mumme air raid offense. And I love watching that offense. It's a fun offense to watch. Northwest Missouri runs the same offense, and so I would that'd be a game I'd be interested in getting to watch.
Same here. They have Colorado Mines, the top passing offense and the top total offensive team in the nation for Division II, so they're going to be really good. Ferris State, same thing. They're a great offensive team, can play defense when they need to, and both teams put up over 60 points. That's impressive. I think you said combined 128. That's exactly right. So I do expect another high-scoring game, but I'm thinking more like maybe 48-41 or something like that. I don't think they go over 110 or anything.
No, I don't. I mean, wouldn't surprise you, but I don't. I mean, it's hard to score that many. Even if you're moving the ball, it's hard to score that many points because that means every time you drive it, you pretty much got to get touchdowns.
Yeah, and you have to have Swiss cheese defenses, which I don't think either of these teams really do. So I think it'll be a high-scoring game, but maybe not that high-scoring. But I do like Ferris State to win and move on. And then the other game could be another good offensive game. Grand Valley taking on A&M Commerce. A&M Commerce, the best team in turnover margin. I believe they're like plus 15 or something. It's very impressive. Grand Valley's just been good all year. I like Grand Valley to win. I think it sets up a rematch between Ferris State and Grand Valley. I think a lot of people want to see that rematch. I think we get it. I think Grand Valley gets the win there and moves on to the quarterfinals.
Well, and actually, I remember I said earlier in this podcast that I picked all the number ones, but I forgot I did pick Ferris State to come out of Super Region 4, but I picked Northwest Missouri and California, PA to come out of the other regions, and UNA to come out of the top region. So I took 3 number ones and a number 2. I really went out on a limb on those picks, didn't I?
Yeah.
But it's really shaping up to be a lot of fun here. Once after this round, if UNA loses this week, Mike, we're going to wrap this thing up.
Right.
But if they don't, we'll come back and we'll break stuff down next week, and we'll see where we stand. Now, most of our podcasts have been close to an hour. I don't think we're near that right now. As a matter of fact, we're at about 30 minutes. But that's really, you start running out of teams, you don't have as much to talk about. But
that's it.
I hate it that I'm not going to get to watch the UNA game live Saturday. But as I mentioned on here before, I do an SEC Saturday show every week, and it's from noon until 2. It ends December 3rd. We have 2 more weeks of that. And so my job obligates me to be there. So I'll try to get a live stream of the UNA game and be tracking all the games. But with UNA kicking off at 12 o'clock, I may be texting you for some updates as well. But I really think this is I really think it's going to be a good Saturday for the Lions. But, I'll tell you what, Mike, even though I don't really dive into this, I don't really dive into the Division II football throughout the country until late in the year, it gets interesting to see how these teams play it out. So I'm looking forward to seeing who's going to be going into the quarterfinals next week.
As am I. And what I hate about it, you talked about UNA playing at noon. Pretty much every team plays early in the day during the playoffs. So, I'll be watching a lot of UNA and obviously covering that game. I am the sideline reporter, and I don't really feel guilty today. Since UNA is the only team left from the Gulf South Conference, I am wearing UNA.
And first time you picked the UNA game all season.
Yes, it's all of our Gulf South teams are out. So, I thought it'd be okay. I mean, why not? But anyway, I'm interested and I hate that every team pretty much plays at the same time because there's a lot of games I would love to watch. Obviously Tuskegee would be one I'd like to watch and see how they do against North Greenville. That Fair State Colorado Mines game, that's going to be a great offensive game. Sioux Falls Harding. There's a lot of good games in Division II going on, and it's going to be fun to watch all of those. Indiana and California, I'm looking forward to that one too. Just all of them are going to be fun, but us being covering what we have to cover makes it a little difficult sometimes, but like you said, as long as we have a team in it, UNA's the only team that can stay in it now for the Gulf South Conference. We'll be here with you every week.
Mike, it's always a pleasure hanging out with you and Will, our producer. Thank you so much. We had to get him on short notice today. I've been a little under the weather this week, so we didn't get to do our podcast at our standard scheduled time, a little behind this week, but still wanted to get something out. Hopefully, folks, you guys will be able to check this out over the Thanksgiving break. We wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving here from the GSC podcast. And for our producer, Will, Mike, I'm Matt Selesky. Hopefully, we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Gulf South Conference Football Weekly Podcast. Tune in next week for more GSC recaps, analysis, and predictions from your hosts, Matt Selesky and Mike Ezekiel.